We're now on page 34 of your working file, the subject of the interactive fill tool, and in our next lesson we'll look at the eyedropper tool. Well, this is that lesson where you'll go, why didn't you show me this earlier rather than what you might call a bit of the old-fashioned way. If you recall, we created this brush metal effect by selecting our object, F11 on our keyboard. We added all of these little color node points here and then created different color perspectives to create the effect we have here, the brush metal effect. Well, there is another way that you'll most likely think is easier. I teach everything because people do have favorite ways of doing things, so it's best you learn all the options. If we were to select the interactive fill tool, which you can see here, interactive fill, or the letter G to select it, select our object. As you can see, we have a line with a series of color whorls on it. And F11, if we compare that, all of these little color points here are the exact same as the color points there. The interactive fill tool allows you to move around and, of course, in real time, see the result. We can select the color whorls, move them along, and fine-tune the result however it is that we want it. Now I'm going to fill this with a light grey, so a solid light grey, and start from scratch. So we select our object, come down, select the interactive fill tool, simply click and drag. You'll notice across the property bar there are a number of options, and make sure the appropriate option is selected first or come back and select it after. It's up to you. We are by default in a linear fill mode. However, you could have selected an alternative, or you can change it on the fly. It's that easy, as you can see. Okay, let's go with linear. To add the color whorls is quite simple. Simply double click, and every time you double click, you add a little color whorl, as you can see. Now, what I might do is to select, just click and you'll see the double line around that color whorl. I'll click on a grey there, select that one, and I'll make it darker. Select that one, no, then go to the next one, make that darker, and then go to this one here and make that darker. And look, with very little effort, it's just that you've got to think light, dark, and that's how we create the effect here. See, I could double click to remove a color whorl and spread the effect out a little bit further so it's not quite so harsh. But I might want to look like I've got a highlight going through there, so I'll move this up here a little bit, and maybe that one's a little dark. So click on here, bring out the little fly out, and go with slightly lighter. How does that look? And that looks quite good, doesn't it? So you can see using the interactive fill tool is quite cool. Just stretch it out a little bit if you want to. You can move the positioning around, close it up, and of course create any type of little effect that you want. Okay, well that'll be the first thing that I want you to do when it's your turn, is to make this a solid color and create your own brush metal effect in there using the interactive fill tool. I'm now going to show you how to create this button effect, and as you can see, we're going to start to learn about depth of color, highlights, and how to create shape and form with highlight or lighter areas and darker areas. So to create this button or light effect is quite simple. Select the ellipse tool, finger on control to create a perfect ellipse. Now in my case it already is blue. And I'm going to again select the interactive fill tool, but this time I'm going to go with a radial fill. Now by default it applies the fill. White is always the starting color, moving out toward the fill that the object already is. I'm simply going to drag that highlight point, close up the circle so it's not too bold, and then I'm going to, in fact I won't do that, I'm going to move it down the bottom. Pop it down the bottom there like that. There we go. Now, plus on my keyboard, create a duplicate, shrink that down just a little. Now, what do you think I'm going to do? First thing I'm going to do is make the outline a light grey. But what am I going to do now? You almost can see a bubbling or a highlighting effect there where you're getting a sense of depth. But watch this. Again, with my interactive fill tool, if I take the highlight and I pop it on the top over there, say about there, pull that back out a little bit. Can you see the effect? We now have a sense of depth, don't we? If I shrink the middle one down a little bit, can you see how it kind of looks conical? The one behind looks conical, the one on top looks like it's raised. In fact, if we remove the outline altogether, can you see the effect? Why? We see we've got a light color down the bottom next to a dark. Up the top we've got dark next to light. And that creates these illusions, because in reality, it's not really happening, is it? It is purely a light-based illusion. Very easy to create, and of course, play with it, increase the size, and decrease the size, and you can get all sorts of interesting effects by simply using 2 radial fills. Well, let me delete that. I'll pop that over there for inspiration. This button we have here is exactly the same. It is nothing more than using 3 rectangles. Let's do it. I'll select the rectangle, click and drag, create my first rectangle, and I'm going to give this an interactive fill from a dark grey through to a white. So click and drag. Finger on Control, by the way, also creates your 15-degree increments. So it helps you to pull a perfectly straight line, finger on Control. Now all I need to do is pull or drag a dark grey, pop it on the top there, bring this up a little bit, finger on Control, just so, and that's probably about right. Notice that little slider in there. When you're dealing with just 2 points, you can move the little slider, and as you can see, it kind of extends one or other of the colours. In this case, it's extending the white, so it's fading a little further to the point of the line, and then it quickly goes through to the darker. And you can go the other way if you want to. In the middle, I usually find is the best option. Now, so there we've created our first rectangle. Plus on the keyboard. Now, what I'll do is increase this out just a little, finger on Control, and finger on Control. It needs to go behind, so Control page down. Now, all I need to do is flip it the other way. So if I flip the other way, look at that. Isn't that impressive? What have I got? I've got 2 rectangles. That's all I've got. In one, the fill is going in one direction. In the other, the fill is going the other direction. And you can create an effect like that. Give it a nice thick black outline. So we go with a 2-point, even a 3-point. And there we go. We've got our button effect. Place the number 1 on top. Shift page up. And that's a button effect. Again, it's using these interactive fills, light versus dark, and you get these great effects. Now finally, a very simple one of course, is what we did for the amplifier sound meters. All I have are a number of rectangles. You select them, group them together, select your interactive fill tool, click and drag, finger on Control to drag up straight, and I'll select the top node or color wheel, make that red, select the bottom one, I'll make that green, and I'll drag and drop, that's the other way of doing it. Oh, it should have been the colour yellow. I wasn't thinking then. The colour yellow into the middle. Right click to remove the outline, and there you go. The interactive fill tool is really, really easy to use. So go ahead now, play with the 4 objects that I've got there for you to play with, create the little buttons, create this effect, and that will help you to become used to it for our future design elements.